The shattering. The ground shook hard under Anya's feet. She ran as fast as her legs could carry her, dodging the fires. The air was hot and her chest hurt from the smoke. All around her people were yelling, crying and running. Crash! A huge piece of stone smashed into the ground close by. Bits of it hit her arms and face. She held up her hands to protect herself, but her forehead had been struck and was bleeding. Her skin stung where it had been sliced. She wanted to scream, but her throat hurt. It was burning. Boom! Another explosion louder than the last. The ground heaved, and Anya fell flat on the road. Her head hit the stone hard and everything spun. For a moment she just lay there, not sure what to do. The shaking stopped for a bit, and she lifted her head. Blood ran down her face and her ears rang. Everything looked blurry. People rushed past her, their faces full of fear. They were yelling, but she couldn't make out the words. The fire nearby made the air shimmer, and it felt unreal, like a bad dream. She looked up and saw the Tower of Omega, the tallest building in the city. It was still standing while everything else around it was broken and burning. It was shiny and smooth, and even though everything was falling apart, the tower looked perfect. For a second Anya felt safe. She knelt down and clasped her hands, whispering a prayer. Crack! The noise made her jump. She looked up and saw a crack running up the side of the tower. More cracks followed, spreading like a web. The tower groaned, swaying back and forth. Anya's eyes went wide. No, she whispered. The tower leaned more and more until, with a loud crash, it fell. It smashed into the ground, sending up a huge cloud of dust and rocks. The air filled with dirt, and the sun disappeared. The ground under her shook again, and she covered her face with her arms. When it finally stopped, the city was quiet. The yelling had faded, and all Anya could hear was her own breathing. She pushed herself to her feet, wobbling like a newborn deer. Her knees shook, but she managed to stand. Omega, she yelled, her voice echoing in the silence. She spun around looking for a sign, for anything. Please, she shouted. Help us. Where are you? No answer came. Mom. Dad, she called. Sal. Reverly. But there was no sign of them. Tears filled her eyes. A hand touched her shoulder, and she turned quickly, hope lighting her face. Mom, she asked. But it wasn't her mother. It was Helen, a neighbor from the next street over. Her face was streaked with tears, and her red dress was ripped and dirty. My baby, Helen said, pulling Anya into a tight hug. You're safe now. I've got you. Anya squirmed, confused. Baby, she mumbled. I'm not. Honey, a man's voice broke in. It was Philip, Helen's husband. His beard was covered in ash, and his clothes were torn. He gently put a hand on Helen's shoulder. Let her go. That's not Ilara. Helen shook her head, holding Anya tighter. Oh, this is my daughter. She's hurt. Philip's voice was quiet but firm. Look at her, Helen. Please. Helen pulled back and stared at Anya. Her hands shook as she looked at the girl's face. For a moment she didn't say anything. Then she collapsed to her knees, sobbing. She's gone, Philip said softly. He knelt beside his wife and held her close. Ilara's gone. Anya stepped back, her head spinning. Her parents were gone. Her best friend Ilara was gone. Her town was destroyed. Everything was gone. She turned her eyes to the place where the tower had stood. The shrine of Omega, the symbol of hope, was nothing but a pile of rubble. Where is he? She whispered, her voice shaking. She clenched her fists, staring at the ruins. Why didn't he stop this? Philip looked at her, his face tired and sad. I don't know, he said. Maybe he gave up on us. Helen sobbed louder, and Philip held her tighter. Anya stood there, staring at the sky, now dark with ash and smoke. Her heart felt heavy, and her mind was filled with questions she couldn't answer. Why did this happen?